we are live.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming and joining us today. My name is Carlin Ning, and I am going to be your event facilitator. So we're just going to quickly go through some housekeeping slides, and then we'll start with the presentation. A special thank you to our program funder, IRCC. Without them, our presentation today would not be possible. And a few quick reminders before we begin. Please turn off your microphones and turn off your cameras. Please note that no abusive language will be tolerated, and do not post any personal information in the chat box. You should save your questions till the end. We will actually allow for a Q&A at the end of this conversation or this topic so that you can ask the special guest speaker some questions. And please note that there will be a special evaluation sent out to everyone who registered to the event at the end of the workshop. We appreciate that you would fill out these evaluations because they provide better quality workshops. I'm also just going to repeat, please mute your microphones and turn off your cameras if possible, as this is a very large group and we just want to make sure that we are hearing our guest speaker. Good afternoon, everyone. And as I said, my name is Carlin Ning and I am your event facilitator. Welcome to an ISC employment event called Stress Busters. As you all know, when we are unemployed, our personal mental health can suffer. Today, we are going to be learning about how to cope with the stress of unemployment. I am very excited to introduce our two lovely guest speakers, Faraz and Priyanka. They come from our own therapy and support center at Immigrant Services Calgary, and I do believe Priyanka has recently moved to a different role. However, she is still just a wonderful mental health advocate. So I just want to welcome you and ask that you please direct your attention to both Faraz and Priyanka. And we will also like to welcome our Facebook Live audience. Be joining us today from Facebook, so please keep in mind that this event is being recorded and is posted online. So if you don't want to be seen, you might want to keep your camera off. All right, thank you. Faraz, you can take over now.
All right, thank you, Carlin. So I'll just get my screen ready for you. All right, can everyone see my screen? All right.
Yes, we can.
All right, great. Hey guys, so thanks for letting us be here today. So we're here today because we want to provide you a training on stress management in relation to unemployment stress. So in case you guys don't know who I am, my name is Faraz Khan. I work as a counselor and team lead supervisor for Immigrant Services Calgary Therapy and Support Center. I was born here in Calgary in Canada, but my family is originally from Pakistan. They came here during the 1970s. I'm currently doing my certification right now to become registered as a marriage and family therapist. And I also run the groups here at Immigrant Services Calgary and do marriage and family therapy sessions as well. So thanks for having me here today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Priyanka, and I work at Immigrant Services Calgary as well. I've been working at ISC for the last 7 years. And during that time, I worked at the Therapy and Support Center as both a counselor and senior coordinator. I'm currently in a different role, but mental health is at my heart and as well as my education. So I will always come back for sessions like this. I think that talking about stress is incredibly important in all aspects of our lives because it does come up quite often. So I'm excited to do this presentation with you guys.
Thank you, Priyanka. And the purpose of this training is to help you learn how to manage your stress and to maybe even challenge your negative thoughts, because sometimes our negative thoughts can kind of destroy us in the end. And the way this presentation, we would like it to make it work is we want it to be really interactive. So we really want to kind of ask you the questions and get your input on a few things as well. So let's get started then. So we want to start by asking you a question. Is stress a good thing or is it a bad thing? What do you guys think? Somebody want to take a guess?
So the responses from the audience in the thing is bad, good thing, stress during stress feel really good, balance
It's a bad thing.
is good.
The stress is a bad thing, I think.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah. A lot of times, sometimes I guess society kind of teaches us that stress is a bad thing. And for us to kind of run away from stress sometimes. But then at the same time, stress can be kind of a good thing though as well, because stress can help us take action, can also help us rise to certain challenges in our own lives. And to be honest, we wouldn't be here without stress actually, because stress is kind of our body's way of letting us know that we should be paying attention to certain things or that we should be kind of concerned about some things actually that are going on. So definitely there's a mix between the two, right? It can be good and it can be bad as well. So thank you for sharing that, guys. But my next question to you guys though is there a relationship, say, between our thoughts and stress as well? And what do you think that relationship kind of looks like? And don't be shy, feel free to speak up.
I think it's complicated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it can be complicated sometimes for sure. You know, there is a relationship between our thoughts and stress, and we'll go into that into a little bit more detail later on in the presentation. But I guess when it comes to stress though, there definitely seems to be the good, the bad, and the ugly with stress. So for example, if we kind of experience stress for like prolonged periods of time, this can actually make us more susceptible, say, to mental illnesses, and can be bad for our health in the long run as well. So learning how to manage our stress is really important. So let's go over some general assumptions when it comes to our thoughts and our emotions. So one thought is, no pun intended, that the way we think often influences the way we feel, and the way we feel influences the way we behave as well. So let me just say that again so it kind of sticks actually. The way we think influences the way we feel, and the way we feel influences the way we behave as well. So imagine if you're thinking negatively, you probably won't feel that great about yourself. And if you're not feeling that great about yourself, you probably won't engage in, say, some constructive behaviors, right? You might actually engage in destructive behaviors instead. Here's another example. Imagine if you're kind of down on your luck and you think things will never get better because you can't find a job. You might start to feel pretty crappy, and you might even start to feel kind of hopeless as well. And if you're feeling hopeless and pretty crappy, you might not, say, get out of bed in the morning and to start like doing something about your situation actually. So in this case, our thoughts kind of create our own emotional realities, and they create a self-fulfilling prophecy in some ways though as well, right? Because it kind of dictates our actions and our behaviors, our thought processes. When it does come to this diagram though, I think it's important to kind of keep in mind that this diagram is actually bi-directional as well. So not only do our thoughts influences our emotions and our behaviors, but also likewise, our behaviors also influence the way we feel and the way we think as well. So imagine if you get up in the morning, you work out, you might start to feel pretty good about yourself, right? After that workout. And if you're feeling pretty good about yourself, you're going to start to think more positively, and that will make you more resilient as well, actually. And then, you know, the cycle kind of like fuels itself back again, right? So like our behaviors influences our emotions and thoughts, but likewise, if you're feeling good or if you're thinking more positively, you're going to feel that and you're going to behave that way as well. But the problem is when it does come to our stress and anxiety, we often think that unconsciously there's something desirable about, say, our stress, and that our anxiety is protecting us in some sort of way, because it's our body's way of letting us know that we should be kind of learned about something, to be alert about something and to be concerned about something. But what becomes problematic is when we take these concerns way too seriously. Okay.
So emotional regulation. So as for us, he just mentioned cognitive behavioral therapy. So a big aspect of cognitive behavioral therapy, like he mentioned, is emotions. So the way you're thinking is impacting the way you're feeling. The way you're feeling is impacting the way you're behaving. So we're going to focus a little bit on those emotions just because of the major role that it plays in your behavior. So emotional regulation. So when we talk about emotions, we have to talk about emotional regulation. So how are you processing the things that you're feeling? And the way that you're processing your feelings is really going to impact the way that you respond and behave. So Faraz mentioned cognitive behavioral therapy. We're also going to be touching on dialectic behavioral therapy, so DBT. So in DBT, we often think about emotions as being at the heart of someone's dysregulation. So emotions being at the core of someone's mental health issues. When they're experiencing some mental health concerns, usually it's going to be connected to their inability to process or regulate their emotions. So in DBT, there are 3 different types of minds that I would like to focus on, or that there are actually. So the first is the reasonable mind. So the reasonable mind is focusing primarily on your intellect, your ability to solve problems. You're very black and white. You're looking at situations very practically with very little emotional involvement. An example that we'll use is, let's say your car breaks down on the side of the street. You're on a busy road, your car breaks down, and all you're thinking about is how to get help, how to process the situation. So how are you going to get your car moving? How are you going to get to maybe the destination that you have? What you're not thinking about is potentially the stress that you're feeling in terms of being stuck on a busy road. Maybe you're not thinking about your safety. You're on a busy road, so what could potentially happen if you're stranded? The next type of mind is the emotional. So we just touched on the reasonable mind. Now we want to talk about the emotional mind. So the emotional mind is only feelings focused. So you're taking out that black and white practical thinking and you're only thinking about emotions. So in this situation, maybe your car breaks down on the side of the street and you're panic stricken. You're freaked out, you're scared, you're not sure how to process this, and you're not thinking about your safety. You're just thinking about the fear you're feeling, the panic you're feeling, maybe the anxiety you have that you were supposed to get to a job interview or you were supposed to get to point B and now you can't get there. So you're only focusing on your feelings. The third type of situation here is the wise mind. So we have the reasonable mind, which is focusing primarily on just black and white practical thinking. You have the emotional mind, which is only emotions. That's the only way you're processing the situation. And then you have the wise mind. So the wise mind is where you're combining the emotional mind as well as the reasonable mind and coming together. So both aspects by themselves, both minds by themselves are not the healthiest. You don't just want to be black and white and you don't just want to be emotional. You want to be able to combine those two things together to create the wise mind. So let's say your car breaks down. Yes, you're thinking, okay, practically, I need to figure out how I'm going to solve this problem, but I'm also emotional because I'm scared. So I'm going to try to keep myself safe. So you're attacking the problem holistically. You're not just thinking about it with emotions and you're not just thinking about it in a black and white manner. So our goal in mental health, and even when we're talking about stress or any sort of heightened emotion, is how can we get to a point where you're regulating your emotions and you're always using your wise mind. Emotional regulation requires mindfulness. So mindfulness doesn't mean meditating to get rid of emotions. It's getting to understand your emotions and processing them. You never want to ignore or distract yourself from something. Instead, you want to feel it, go through it, and process it. Learning how to regulate our emotions increases happiness. So your tendency to feel better and have more positive emotions is going to come from your ability to process your emotions in a healthy way. So if you're panicked and you're processing that panic in a healthy way, you're going to feel happy quicker. When we have emotional problems, we start to have other problems. So like Faraz was touching on with CBT, if you're having heightened emotions and you're whatever those might look like, they can lead to some negative behaviors, right? So what you're thinking leads to the feelings, and what you're feeling leads to the behavior. So if you're having emotional problems, that can lead to other sort of problems as well. Once you have a good idea of how to regulate your emotions, everything becomes a lot easier. So tasks that maybe cause a lot of anxiety or stress are now much easier to go through and process because you have the ability to regulate your emotions. So the functions of emotion. So this is a conversation that I have with clients, with friends, with everyone around me, is we often have this tendency to put emotions in a good category and a bad category. We don't want to feel bad. We don't want to feel anxious. We don't want to feel frustrated. We want to feel happy and excited and whatever other gratitude, whatever good emotion you can think of. So we like to put them in good and bad. But the reality is each emotion that we experience has a function. It has a purpose and it has a reason for being there. When we think about anger, anger comes up from a lot of different reasons. Anger comes up because maybe we don't have a need that's being met. Maybe there's an obstacle in our path that we need to get over. Maybe we're frustrated by something, but it serves that purpose. When it comes to sadness, maybe you're feeling that sadness because you're mourning a situation, you're going through grief, right? If we were to bypass that emotion, it doesn't ever really disappear, it just kind of stays there and almost makes us, that goes back to that emotional dysregulation, right? It can lead to other mental health issues. What we want to do instead of trying to ignore and push down feelings, and at IC, we have our therapy and support center. So we have our therapy groups. And within those groups, we talk about emotions in probably every single session. And the biggest thing to avoid is pushing our emotions down, trying to ignore them, and trying not to think about them, because that doesn't make them go away. Emotions never go away, they just stay there. So if we try to ignore them or push them away, chances are they're going to get stronger, and maybe they're going to come back at a time where you least expect. So what do we want to do instead? Every emotion that we're feeling, we want to label it and we want to acknowledge it. So if you're feeling angry, I'm feeling angry right now. That's the label I'm going to attach to it. If you're not so sure about what you might be feeling, that's where that mindfulness comes into play. So if I'm feeling a little uncertain, maybe I'm going to meditate. Maybe I'm going to take a few deep breaths. Maybe I'm going to go for a walk and try to process what that feeling is and label it. Once we're able to label our emotions, we're able to process them and regulate them. Emotions motivate action. So if you're angry and you realize there's an obstacle in front of my path, I want to get to point B and I'm not able to get there because this obstacle is there and that's making me angry. That anger is going to motivate me, hopefully in a positive manner, to deal with that obstacle and jump over it in a way that works for me as well as the people around me. Emotions also help us socialize, communicate, and connect. If I'm feeling stress, since we're talking about stress busters and stress management, I might connect with one of my colleagues, I might connect with a friend, I might connect with someone near me. Maybe they have a similar experience. We can communicate that. I can process my emotions with them. It also helps us relate to others when we see people and we think they're going through something. It's a little difficult now in this virtual world, but when we see someone, we're able to connect with them over the way they feel because maybe we had the similar experience and potentially have some ways to help them through it. So emotions are necessary. They're needed for us in a lot of different ways. And I think the more we see them as such, the less we'll keep them in a good and bad category.
Thank you, Franca. So we want to ask you guys a question, and we want to do like a small activity with you guys. So we want to ask you, what do you think each emotion listed here secretly is trying to communicate? So what do you think the emotion sadness might be trying to communicate to you whenever you do experience sadness?
Sorry for us. I think we were losing you. We couldn't hear you properly.
Oh, no problem, no problem. So we want to ask you, what does each of these emotions here, what do you think they might communicate secretly to you when you do experience these emotions? So, for example, what do you think the emotion sadness might communicate or might be telling you when you do feel sadness?
When I feel sadness, I want to cry, and I don't want to do anything, and I keep thinking what's going on, and I feel like I'm hopeless. Yeah. For example, if I cannot find a job currently, then I feel very sad, and I don't want to do anything sometimes. But sometimes it motivates me also, and to find a job. Yeah, this is
Thank you
how
for
I
sharing.
feel.
Thank you so much for sharing that, actually. Definitely sounds like when we do experience sadness, it's usually in regards to something that's kind of missing from our life or something that we might have lost as well. And it's something that we're kind of like hoping for or trying, or that was something that we kind of want, right? And when we don't experience that, we experience sadness.
Yeah.
And Prinka,
And
did
I
you?
think there was some, yeah, I just
Right.
was going to read some of the comments in the comment section. So sadness, something is not going as per your expectation, or a loss of a loved one. Definitely, that's kind of what was just mentioned here too, right? You have certain expectations, you want something to happen a certain way, and that it doesn't, and you feel the loss of that. And of course, the loss of a loved one.
Mm-hmm.
Another comment: take a step back, think, and then react. Yeah, exactly. Emotional regulation goes back to taking a step back, not immediately reacting, and processing the way that you're feeling before reacting.
Faraz, this is Bobby.
Mm-hmm.
May I make a suggestion to you, please? I
Yeah,
see
go
that
ahead.
one of your headphones are down. I
Oh,
believe if you were to put it back up, your voice would stop resonating, I guess. Right now, we can't hear you as well. If you don't mind,
okay,
maybe
okay. How is this better?
this is much better. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for the suggestion, Poppy.
Of course, of course.
All right, thank you for those examples, guys. Those are great examples about sadness. What about the emotion happiness? What do you think that might be indicating to you? When you experience happiness, how does that feel like? When does that usually happen? Go ahead, Meenakshi.
You smile.
You smile? Yeah. And
I
go
sorry,
ahead.
this is Bobby again. I tend to feel happy when things tend to work out my way.
So you're right. When we achieve a desirable outcome, for sure. So when you kind of accomplish an objective in some ways, that kind of puts a smile onto your face, as Meenakshi would say. Okay, great, great examples. And what about fear? What do you guys think fear might indicate?
The feeling of unknown.
Mm-hmm. Feeling of the known. Sometimes they kind of argue that fear is kind of like the strongest and oldest emotion, actually. And what we kind of fear the most is the unknown, just as you said, Bobby. How about for other people?
Someone in the chat said uncertainty.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's kind of funny how there's that relationship between fear and uncertainty, actually. We kind of fear what we don't know. Okay. And what about anger in this case?
I feel this is Bobby here. I feel as though sadness, happiness, and fear leads to anger because it causes expectation, and then when your expectations are not met, anger comes to effect.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's great insight, actually. So when we do have unmet expectations, that could cause anger. Or, for example, say when bad things happen to us, such as, say, injustices, right? That could cause a lot of anger as well. And anger and all these other emotions, they can be seen as really functional emotions because sometimes you need anger in certain situations. So for example, say God forbid, right? You're someone who kind of like breaks into your house. You kind of need that anger to kind of defend yourself in some ways. Go ahead, Priyanka.
I was just going to read some of the things in the chat. Fear of future, fear of my family, and a reaction to something you don't like. So the first one is about fear, and then the second is about anger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know for myself especially, right? What I fear the most is like I have a lot of fears regarding my family members, right? So I'm really like always concerned about their safety sometimes. But then when that fear becomes out of control, it can be kind of problematic though. So having a little bit of fear is kind of a good thing, right? Because it helps us to kind of care for the ones that we do love.
Fear, I feel that when it's survival instinct, it works out in your favor. When fear works uh, in a way to help you, it's good. But as Faraz just said, especially in South Asian communities, I guess, uh,
Mhm.
fear for family almost turns into obsession sometimes, and that could be problematic.
That's a good example, Bobby. Having too much fear, it can not only strain ourselves, but the relationship with other people as well. That's a great example, man. Thank you for that. Okay, and then the last three, jealousy, love, and shame. What do you guys think these three emotions might indicate?
Jealousy for me, I guess 2021. It's one of my uh, goals to eliminate jealousy as much as I can from my life, and that is because I saw that even though I didn't realize that I was jealous uh, from surroundings, from the people around me, I was, and jealousy came from the factors that why did that other person was born with a silver spoon in there, or
Mhm.
whatever they have, and why don't I have that, and all that factors. It's just uh, figuring out that why and the what's and the hows are the biggest
Mhm.
things that I guess for me causes jealousy.
Okay, okay. Thank you for sharing that, Bobby. Right. So sometimes maybe the fear, it kind of like fuels the jealousy in some ways though too, right? And sometimes we kind of become jealous when we are kind of scared of losing something that's kind of dear to us. And when we act in fear, sometimes we kind of act irrationally as well. Right? So thanks for that, Bobby. And what about for the last two then? Love and shame.
We had a comment for jealousy, not being
Mhm.
happy with someone else's happiness. So I guess very similar to previous responses. I would also just add in jealousy, sometimes it can come from mistrust and not having a foundation of trust. So it could be that you maybe don't trust the person if you're talking about intimate relationships.
Yep, that's true. Maybe having a little bit of jealousy is healthy in a relationship, but too much jealousy, though, it can create like mistrust in a relationship. And it can really hurt your relationship, though, as well, when you're acting on that jealousy.
Yep. And we have for love, love warms your heart. For shame, shame of failure, and for love, let you be happy.
Thank you for that. So I really like this emotion, love, because love allows us to kind of connect to other people and show our appreciation for other people as well. So kind of love, kind of like in a cliche, kind of brings the world together in some ways, right? It connects us together. Whereas the feeling of shame kind of has to do more about feeling that there's something wrong with you overall, or that like you're not kind of good enough. And then when we kind of carry on to that shame and hold on to it, it can like really hurt us in the long run. So whenever we do have shame, ideally we want to talk about our shame in order to kind of let go of that emotional pain that we might be holding on to. And as you guys can see, imagine if we did not have these emotions, then we kind of be like robots in some ways. And to truly experience life, you have to experience the vast arrays of emotions. Because you can't be happy all the time, you can't be sad all the time, right? So it's kind of like up and down with each part. But the great thing about emotions, though, they allow us to take action, they allow us to communicate, they allow us to be social with other people. And like as we were talking about love, they allow us to connect with other people. And when we do experience these emotions, it's almost like our body's way of kind of communicating with us. And it's trying to indicate something to us as well. So if you think about it, emotions, they're pretty cool, actually. Because without them, life would be kind of boring, I guess. All right, guys. So we kind of talked about how we feel influences the way we behave. And sometimes we make bad decisions based on how we're feeling. So imagine if you're really angry, you might say something to your partner that you might regret. And likewise, our mood it affects our judgment, and it also affects the decisions that we make as well. So for example, studies have shown that on sunnier days, people are much happier and they're much more likely to do things that they enjoy versus on cloudy days, even though the temperature might be the same. So I guess the point here is that, we often make decisions based on how we feel rather than kind of thinking things through rationally. So it's kind of important to recognize as well that there are distortions in our negative thoughts, and our negative thoughts might not be telling us the complete picture sometimes. Go ahead, Priyanka.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay, cool. So
I was just going to say, I think your voice might be cutting in and out a little bit. So maybe if you could hold the mic to your, even going like that might help. It just kind of waves in and out.
I don't think there's a mic on this actually, but what I can do, I can bring my computer closer to it. So maybe this might help. Does this help at all? Yeah, sounds good. Okay.
Yes, it does.
For us, maybe you could just repeat the last 20 seconds of what you were
Okay, no problem. Yeah, no worries at all. So it's kind of important to recognize that there are distortions in our negative thoughts, and our negative thoughts might not be telling us the complete picture sometimes. So here's a list of different unhealthy thinking styles that we often trap ourselves in sometimes without kind of realizing it. So let's go through some of these together. So for example, the first one, and is everyone hearing me okay now? Is it better now? Yeah?
Yes.
All right, perfect. So the first unhelpful thinking style that we sometimes trap ourselves in is called all or nothing thinking. So sometimes this can be called black and white thinking. And someone that is experiencing this, they might say to themselves, if I'm not perfect, I failed, or either I do it right or not at all. So I'll give you guys an example. Imagine if you're applying for a job and you work really hard on the application and the cover letter. You spend a lot of time on it. And once you do submit it, right after the submission, you notice that you made a slight typo in the letter itself. So you might end up becoming really hard on yourself and start to punish yourself as well just because of that slight mistake you made, and you ignore everything else that went well in that application.
The next is over, and something I wanted to mention actually, as we're going through all of these different cognitive distortions, you'll notice a lot of similarities and overlap. A lot of these do have a lot of overlap and similarities. So sometimes they do happen in groups. It doesn't always happen as one or another. So the next one is overgeneralizing. So this is when you see a pattern after one single event. So let's say everything's going pretty well, and then one day something negative happens. Maybe you get a bad phone call, a bad email, a friend or someone around you says something negative to you. And then all of a sudden, it's nothing ever goes well for me. People don't like me. People aren't nice to me. So we use one event to define us in the grand scheme of things. So that would be termed as overgeneralizing.
The third type is called mental filtering. So this is where we only pay attention to certain types of evidence. So for example, we might only notice our failures, but not seeing our successes. And the thing is though too, guys, right? Whenever bad things happen to us, we focus on that one small thing, but we ignore everything else well that's going well for us around us actually. So we ignore all the good things and just kind of focus on that one small bad thing that's happened currently in our life right now.
And then we have disqualifying the positive. So that's very similar to overgeneralizing. So you don't really care when good things happen to you. You only care when negative things happen to you. And I can give examples of school. Let's say you're consistently getting good grades or good responses from your teachers, and then you don't really have a reaction. But the minute you get a negative response, you respond to that and you react to that. So we can get into this pattern quite quickly when you have unrealistic expectations of yourself and you don't really sit back and enjoy all that you've done.
And another one is called jumping to conclusions. So there are two key types of jumping into conclusions. The first one is mind reading, where we imagine we know what the other person is thinking. And then the other one is fortune telling, where we kind of predict the future actually. So in regards to mind reading, say if like you're working with someone, right? And they don't talk to you very much, you might start to think that, that person doesn't like you. But for all we know, that person can be kind of shy actually, right? They're not good to talking to other people. It takes them a little bit to open up, right? So we kind of just automatically assume the worst in some ways with mind reading. The second type, fortune telling, this is where we predict the future. So say something bad happens to us in the past or something bad happened to us in the past, we might predict the same outcome for ourselves in the future actually. And we might only think that bad things are going to happen just because of that one bad thing we went through in the past.
Then we have magnification and minimization. So that's when you take something small and you make it really, really big. That's very similar, I guess, to the disqualifying the positive. Again, I'll try to connect these to show how similar some of these can be sometimes. So magnification, let's say you have one bad interview, or maybe let's say during your interview, you notice that the interviewer looks at a different direction or maybe looks down. And then you immediately think, oh, they don't like me. They're not paying attention to me. They're not interested in what I have to say. And that can be connected to jumping to conclusions as well. That small little action, you blew it out of proportion, made it big, and then jumped to the conclusion that the person's not listening to you. Minimization as well. So that's the opposite end of things. Something really big happens, but you act like it's not that big of a deal. And that can happen quite often as well.
All right. So it just doesn't end there, right? So there's also emotional reasoning. So this is where we assume that because we feel a certain way, that we must think it to be true actually. So say if we're kind of feeling really insecure at the moment, we might start to think that other people are noticing that and other people might be judging us because of that, actually. So someone that is experiencing this, they might say, I feel embarrassed, so I must be an idiot, actually. So this is where we kind of start to punish ourselves and start to apply labels to ourselves as well.
Thanks, Ross. Sorry, your voice cut out, so I'm just going to repeat a little bit of what you said in the beginning. Technology is not a fun thing. So emotional reasoning, just like Faraz said, it's connecting the emotion and using it as a label for yourself. So instead of just labeling the emotion, you're now using the emotion as a label for yourself. So you're feeling embarrassed, so I would have to be an idiot. So that can be really unhealthy because you're turning opinions and feelings into facts. The next is should and must statements. So these can be connected again to a lot of the other distortions that we mentioned. So this is where you have really, I guess, unrealistic expectations of yourself. I should be this way. I must get 100% on every exam. I should get a call back from every interview. And when we put these unrealistic expectations on ourselves, what ends up happening is when something doesn't work out the way we say that it should, we feel guilty, we don't feel good about ourselves, and we feel like we've failed. So as high as the expectation as we have it for ourselves, that's how low you drop when you feel like you don't meet it. So it can be very damaging to ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's also what we call labeling as well. So this is where we assign labels to ourselves or other people. So for example, someone might call themselves, I'm a loser, I'm completely useless, or, I'm such an idiot, actually. And the thing is, when we do apply these labels to ourselves, it can be really harmful, actually, especially when we start to kind of internalize these labels. Because if we start to internalize these labels, we might actually start to believe these to be true about ourselves, actually. So like we kind of maybe even create a self-fulfilling prophecy in some ways, right? By assigning these labels, we start to treat ourselves that way as well.
The last one is personalization. So this is when you say that things are your fault when they maybe might not be. So blaming yourself for taking responsibility for things that you really don't have any control over. An example could be it starts snowing and maybe the train gets you late to where you have to be, right? You have an appointment, you're not able to make it because the train didn't show up because of the snow. And you start blaming yourself, if only I had come here earlier, if only I had known, if only I had thought about this. So things that aren't necessarily in your control. I wish we could control the weather, it's just not the case. The next is blaming other people for things that you have control over. So if only you had told me that or if only you had forced me to do this cover letter or pushed me to write this cover letter or pushed me to start the cover letter a week before. All three of those things are in your control, but sometimes we have a tendency to blame other people for the things that we have control over.
Thank you, Priyanka. We're just doing a quick mic check right now. Can you guys hear me okay? Is this better now?
Yeah. Yep.
All right, cool.
Your voice is much clearer.
All right, nice.
Before you guys move forward, I would like to say I love your presentation. It's graphic. It's great.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks so much. So if you guys like, we can definitely forward you these different unhealthy thinking styles. And I guess the point of this is to kind of show is that there's so many different ways that we can think negatively and how easy it is to think negatively. It's so much harder to think positively for some reason. And I think by human nature, we have been kind of conditioned to think negatively, especially when we experience adversity in our own lives. So what can we do then?
Thanks, Ross. So what can we do? We experience these feelings. Just like I said, they don't go away. Even if we try to tell ourselves to push them away, distract ourselves, ignore them, the emotions are still there. So what can you do? The biggest thing and the most impactful thing that you can do when you're feeling strong emotions is to let some time pass. When you're letting time pass, what ends up happening, you give yourself the time to go through these emotions and experience them. The more we try to speed things up and make things happen quicker or make us go through the emotions quicker, the more is left behind. So if you're feeling really angry and you try to tell yourself, it's okay, I'm not angry anymore, it's fine, I'll deal with it. The anger's still there. It doesn't really go away. It's just going to come back in a different way. The next thing that's also very important is when you see someone else experiencing a certain emotion and they're experiencing a strong emotion, it's not going to be very helpful to tell them to stop. So imagine when you're feeling really stressed out and someone tells you calm down. It usually has the opposite effect. It doesn't calm you down. If anything, it makes you more frustrated. Why aren't you understanding how I'm feeling? Why aren't you empathetic to the way I'm feeling? The next is be more mindful and cognitive of our decisions. So we talked about this a little bit. Think before you react. So feel your emotions, process them, regulate them before you engage in any behavior. The worst thing that can happen is when you're feeling something and you're feeling a heightened emotion and you respond right when you're feeling it, you behave in a way that you wouldn't have if you were calmer. So think about all the times where you've been really angry or really frustrated or really anxious, and think about the behaviors that you engaged in right when you were feeling that emotion. Chances are they weren't the best for you or for the people around you. Instead, let's be mindful. So that word comes up a lot here. So mindful, experience your emotion, process it, and find a way to regulate it. So I'm feeling anxious. Why am I feeling that way? Where is this feeling coming from? And then you go into the cognitive distortions we thought about. Is my anxiety coming because of a valid, real reason? Or am I feeling anxious over one of the cognitive distortions? Am I overgeneralizing? Am I labeling myself? Am I any of one of the, I think it was a lot of the ones that we just listed there. So think about it and really go experience the emotion and go through it and process it. So setting good defaults or simple thresholds to measure happiness or sadness. So why is that? Just because of this relates directly to the distortions that we just mentioned. If you have small thresholds for happiness, so I wake up in the day and I'm happy because when I have my tea. I have the tea that I really like to drink and it's there and it's available. So I'm going to have my tea and now that makes me happy. That sets the tone for the day. For me, it's coffee, but there are tea drinkers out there, so I'll acknowledge that. Setting thresholds for happiness, what it ends up doing is it kind of pulls you away from setting those unrealistically high expectations for yourself. The minute you do that, instead of being happy at the little things, when they say stop and smell the roses and experience that, you don't do that anymore. You wait for the big things to happen and you're never happy until that does. Same thing for sadness. The reason we have thresholds to experience sadness is so that you don't go from being calm to extremely sad at everything that happens to you. So that's where that minimizing and catastrophizing thing comes into play as well. So if something small, relatively small happens and you react in a really, really big way, it might not be the healthiest or the best way to respond to it. So setting small thresholds or little limits will allow you to experience emotions at a greater range. You're not going from calm to extremely heightened, which can lead to some mental health issues.
Thank you, Priyanka. And I guess what you're saying too is that, sometimes it's just the small things in life that kind of make you happy, like having that tea in the morning, for example, right? And whenever you are feeling a certain way, I think it's always important to ask yourself these two questions. Why do you think you are feeling this way? And is it irrational for you to be thinking this way? And sometimes when we are feeling a certain way and then we're feeling negatively, sometimes it has to do with our own insecurities, actually. And when we're feeling insecure, we tend to kind of project that outwards as well. All right, guys. So in CBT, there is something that's called a negative thought spiral. So whenever we have a negative thought, although it starts off really small, becomes bigger and bigger the more we entertain that negative thought. So whenever we have a negative thought and we entertain that negative thought, it becomes bigger and bigger and essentially kind of spirals out of control. So they call this the process of rumination, which means to go deep into a thought. And in this case, a negative thought actually. So when we have a negative thought and entertain that negative thought, it gets worse and worse. And this can have really bad consequences for you because it can make you become conditioned to think negatively and help you develop anxiety over the long run through our thinking, through our negative thoughts. So ideally, what we want to do is that we want to try to intervene early and to kind of stop our negative thoughts from spiraling out of control. So what we can do is when we do have a negative thought, we can acknowledge the negative thought. We can say hello to it, but then we want to quickly dismiss the negative thought. It's kind of similar to the analogy that your brain is kind of like a house. Imagine that you hear the doorbell ring and you look outside and you see your negative thoughts standing outside. But it's kind of like holding a gun or something, right? And you can wave to your negative thought from inside the window, but you don't want to let it in. You don't want to entertain it as a guest because of the damage that it can cause by letting it inside, by entertaining it, right? So likewise, just as we have negative thought spirals, we also have positive thought spirals as well. So the more positive thoughts you have, this will lead to even more positive thoughts actually. And what this can look like is say just simply believing in yourself, recognizing your own value and trusting yourself as well. But you need to constantly tell yourself this. And if the more positive thoughts you have, they'll cancel out the negative thoughts actually. But the problem is we're so conditioned to kind of think negatively. So it makes it kind of difficult to do so. So negative thoughts create negative thought spirals and positive thoughts create positive thought spirals as well. All right, any questions about this before we move on?
Yes, I have a question.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Did you say that positive thought, there's a positive thought spiral as well, just like a negative thought spiral?
Yeah,
and
that's what I said.
basically
Actually.
what I kind of understood was that positivity negates negativity.
Yeah, so the positive kind of cancels out the negative in some way, right? So you kind of replace the negative thoughts with the positive thoughts.
Well, here's a situational-based question to you.
Sorry, I'll need to interrupt here. Faraz, can we take the questions at the end of the session? Because we'll have to stop Facebook Live before we start taking questions.
Okay, no problem. My apologies.
Yeah, sorry, thank you.
Yeah, so we can definitely answer that at the end, okay, Bobby? All right, so let's go on to this one. All right, guys, so in CBT, we also have something called positive reframing, actually. So we mentioned before that there is a relationship between our negative thoughts and stress. So the more negative thoughts we have, the more stress and anxiety we will have as well. So with positive reframing, what this is that we ideally want to see what are some of the benefits or the positive aspects to your negative thoughts actually. So when working with clients, we might ask them, what is it about your feelings that shows you're beautiful and awesome? What are some of the benefits to your worrying? And what do these negative thoughts say about you as a person? So I'll give you guys an example. A lot of times we constantly worry about our own family members. However, little do we know that these thoughts are actually coming from a really good place of profound love for our family members. Or say, for example, you're really getting stressed out because like you can't find a job. What your negative thoughts could actually be saying to you is that, you know what, you really care about finding a job and you want to do well. You want to provide for yourself and for your family. So it's actually coming from a good place, but we kind of perceive it as something negative actually. So what we want to do whenever we have a negative thought, we want to positively reframe that negative thought into a positive thought, actually. So we want to see what the benefits and the positive aspects are to that negative thought and what kind of function that negative thought might be serving as well. And doing so might help alleviate stress, right? Because you're recognizing, that negative thought might be actually coming from a good place. Okay. And the way we perceive stress matters, and perceiving stress in different ways can help alleviate stress as well. So there's 3 types of stresses in our lives. There's good stress, there's bad stress, and there's ugly stress as well. So good stress is when we're going through a stressful situation, but we're in full control over that outcome. So I'll give you guys an example. Imagine, say, going to the gym or working out. You're putting stress on your body, but you have full control over the outcome. With bad stress, this is when we're going through a stressful situation, but we only have some control over that outcome. So we're not complete control, just some control over that outcome. So what this could look like, for example, is, say, paying your bills, writing an exam, being stuck in traffic because you don't know if you're going to make it to your appointment on time. So that's where you only have some control over that outcome. The third type of stress is what is known as ugly stress. And this is when we're going through a really stressful situation, but we have zero control over that outcome. So for example, what this could look like is, say, like God forbid, death of a family member, losing your job as well. There's something bad really happening. So there's these 3 different types of stress. And what could be helpful to you is to kind of recognize that stress is a normal part of daily life. We're going to be experiencing stress no matter what. But what could be helpful is to kind of differentiate what type of stress we're going through. A lot of times, we're either going through, say, good stress or bad stress. And, the thing about bad stress is that the only thing you can really do is just play your part and kind of hope for the best, actually. So the way I kind of see bad stress is almost like you're playing basketball. When you're playing basketball, you kind of have to take those shots. You don't know if the shots are going to go into the net or not, but what matters the most is that you took that shot to see what will happen. And chances are, if you keep making that shot, eventually the ball will go into the net. But you have to take that chance, though. You kind of have to act and kind of hope for the best, actually, for the best outcome. So perceiving stress in different ways definitely helps in dealing with stress as well. And to normalize that stress is a part of daily life, actually. Okay. And to deal with stress, another great way is just seeking support, actually. So we all are social beings and bump into problems every single day. But having a strong social support system can help alleviate stress by having someone there to kind of listen to your story, actually. So this is because usually when we go through difficult circumstances in our life, our blood pressure, or like we might have higher blood pressure and increased stress, but having the presence of family and friends can actually kind of bring this down, actually. So having that support. And studies have actually shown, though, too, that having support actually reduces stress and makes you more resilient as well. And so if you guys are looking at this diagram, we have different types of social support systems in our own lives. So for example, on the inner circle, we have our family members. On the outer circle, we have our friends. On the outer circle, we have the spiritual activities that we're kind of involved with. And on the peripheral, we have our community activities. And each of these layers, it can be seen as shields, actually, that can protect you. So the more of these shields that you kind of have in place, the less likely life challenges will kind of reach your internal core, actually. So having more of these support systems set in place makes you more resilient to life's challenges. And a great way to kind of support someone It's just to simply listen to that person actually. But it's not just listening. It's also listening coupled with validation. So what validation kind of looks like is just simply appreciating and acknowledging what the other person is saying to you. So imagine if Priyanka is telling me about her day and she's having a bad day. I could say to Priyanka, you know what, that sounds really difficult, Priyanka, or that sounds like a really tough day. Or I can't imagine what that day must have been like for you, right? Or simply just kind of paraphrase what she says back. Sorry, Priyanka, I don't usually use this on you. But just simply paraphrasing what the other person is saying to you actually, right? And by doing so, allows the other person to kind of feel understood actually, right? And validated as well. All right, guys. And if all else fails, what you can do is refer yourself or your friend out to counseling actually. So at Immigrant Services Calgary, through our therapy and support center, we have two different types of counseling programs. We have our psychotherapy and counseling services, and we have our mandated program as well, which is called Becoming a Better You. So through our psychotherapy and counseling services, we offer counseling for marriage counseling, anxiety, depression, trauma, life changes, experiencing loss in your life as well, and a whole array of issues actually. And these services are meant to be low cost and affordable. So say if you're really struggling, we might only charge the clients like $5 or $10. And if they are severely struggling, we could waive the fee altogether actually. And we receive referrals for this program from different sources. So we receive from Children's Services, from different clinics around the city, from CCAS, from community corrections, probation lawyers. And as part of our counseling services though too, we also do workshops as well on different topics. So for example, today, like stress management, we do cultural sensitivity training as well, and a bunch of other different topics. So we do that too. And we also have our mandated program. So both Priyanka and I also run group counseling sessions at our agency for anger management and domestic violence. But the great thing about this program is that we receive self-referrals for this program as well. And this is a great program for anyone to take actually, because it kind of teaches you the tools to live like a happy life and to develop healthy relationships with your loved ones actually. So in this program, you learn about communication skills, you learn about healthy boundaries as well, learn about anger management and stress management. So just pretty much tools to create a healthy relationship. And you know, although we only have like, although this program is only 13 sessions long, we have guys that continue to attend the program after graduation, because this program serves as a great platform to hold yourself accountable to creating positive changes in your own life as well. So you can definitely access this program if you need to too, and it is a free program. And the great thing about this program as well, we are one of 3 treatment approved agencies in the city that provides this type of counseling actually. And that's about it. Here's our references, and thank you guys for having us here today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to Farah, Priyanka. I really appreciate that they put so much effort and time into giving the presentation. So we're now about to open our Q&A session. Just a quick announcement though, we're going to stop our Facebook Live, so I need to say goodbye to our Facebook Live audience and thank them for joining us.